Doom Eternal concludes with the Ancient Gods Part 2. Upon its release, controversy arose. But what does this mean for the future of the series? Are there story and lore discrepancies as a result of the DLC? Well, with those questions in mind, here's a critique on Doom lore. The Ancient Gods Part 2 has caused quite the impact. Since its inception, the Doom community has seen its fair share of polarization, mostly geared towards how the DLC plays. This video, however, is not focused on the gameplay of the Ancient Gods Part 2, but rather its story and lore. The controversy has died down in the weeks following the DLC's launch. But before I begin this analysis, I have to add a disclaimer. There are a lot of strong feelings about the DLC. If you enjoyed Tag 2's story, then I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong. In fact, there are plenty of moments where I very much enjoyed it myself. This analysis is just one fan's take on Doom Eternal's lore and story. I have a huge passion for Doom, having played games in the series since I was a kid. In fact, both 2016 and Eternal brought this channel newfound attention. To this day, I have the utmost respect for the folks over in id Software, especially with them taking criticism so well and being active within the community. With all that being said, and with the deepest sincerity, I do have some critiques on how both the story and lore is presented within the Ancient Gods Part 2. To explain why, I'll start off with a basic overview of the lore up to this point. So, let's get started. The creation story of the Doom universe begins with the rivalry between the Father and Devoth, the Dark Lord. The former originally presented as a high creator that fathered reality, while the latter, the Dark Lord, was one of the Father's first gods that he chose to lead a new world that would eventually become Hell. And due to a disagreement on the subject of mortals obtaining immortality, a rift grew between the two, causing Hell to invade universes of many, ending with both the Father and Dark Lord to reside within their respective life spheres. All the while, Hell continued to grow and expand, which leads us to the events of the original Doom games. Under the perspective of Doom Guy, we see one of these invasions in progress. Fast forward a bit, and Doom Guy decides to remain in Hell to halt the demonic spread. Later, he somehow made it to Argentinor, where he first met the Night Sentinels along with the Makers. And following a demonic invasion led by a Titan, the Seraphim guided Doom Guy over to the Divinity Machine, granting him godlike strength, and as a result, the Doom Slayer was born. Thus, the events prior to Doom 2016 take place, in which both the Slayer and the Night Sentinel army invaded Hell, but were thwarted by the Hell Priests manipulating the Betrayer, with the Sentinel army routed and the Slayer alone. He was later captured and held into a sarcophagus until Samuel Hayden released him. With the additional help of the AI known as Vega, they thwarted a demonic threat on Mars. Some time passes, and we enter Doom Eternal, where the Slayer halts another invasion from Hell, this time with a new Earth. Through rampaging across Makerland and killing off the Khan Maker, it was then revealed that the AI Vega is the deity known as the Father, while Samuel Hayden being the Seraphim. And this is where we enter the story of the Ancient Gods. Beginning with Part 1, we start with the Slayer and Samuel working together to seemingly resurrect the Father, only to find out the Slayer's real plan was to revive the Dark Lord, in an effort to end the threat of Hell for good. The twist being, the Dark Lord is actually the Slayer's spitting image. And this is where the Ancient Gods Part 2 begins, picking up right after the Slayer's first exchange with Devoth, in which the Dark Lord states he will wait for the Slayer in the city of Amora, the capital of Hell. In order to make his way there, the Slayer, with the aid of a Sentinel army, found the means to open a portal to the oldest parts of Hell. In ancient times, a world spear impaled the Sentinel world pole to pole, unleashing rains that invigorated the land. Upon the Slayer's visit to this world sphere, hints to the wraith's origins were uncovered. With Sentinel Crystal in hand, the Slayer carved a portal leading to the city of Amora. And upon the desolate landscape, the armies of Hell and Argent Anor collided, culminating with a duel between Dark Lord and Slayer. During their battle, it was revealed that Devoth was the first being and not the father. That the Dark Lord wished to grant his creations immortality, but when other deities took note of this, they stripped him of his power and name. Thus, Hell's bloody crusade against other worlds was a remnant of their Dark Lord's revenge against all of creation. Despite this revelation, the Slayer defeated the Dark Lord just the same, not only severing the demonic threat, but also his own link to divine power, for his otherworldly strength was on loan from the divinity machine, tied to the Dark Lord. And upon his death, the Slayer rests his weary hands, kept once again in sarcophagus. When will he rise once more? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Overall, I had a good time with the DLC, but I do have some critiques. To start, let's discuss his interview with Hugo Martin when concerning Tag 1.
And I thought Tag 1 had bad pacing. That's it. It was awesome. But on a scale of 1 to 10, every single encounter is an 8 to 10. Like, every single one. Like, here's a hallway. It's super hard. Here's the next thing. It's super hard. The feedback that I got from Tag 1 is that it was poorly paced and amazing but exhausting. You know, so I found people heading into the Samur fight tired, and I didn't want that. You know, like, because by the time they get to Samur, they're just like, God, that whole bridge was so crazy.
In other words, Hugo stated that Tag 1 may not have the best gameplay pacing, and while I would understand that assessment, in regards to both story and lore, I found Tag 1's pacing to be rather streamlined and easy to understand, connecting to pre-existing lore seamlessly while expanding upon the creation tale. Plus, it included a really interesting twist. That's not to say I thought Tag 1 was perfect. For example, I wasn't the biggest fan of how the intern explained obvious information to the player, but I later found the intern to be a really endearing and sometimes wholesome character. So, entering into part 2, I was excited to see where both the story and lore would go, and for me, it's very much a mixed bag. Positive things out of the way first, I am very much intrigued about the world sphere, the mystery of the wraiths, and the origins of the ancient gods themselves. However, other plot points leave me a bit confused. For starters, we head to the Gate of Voom, which according to the Codex entries states, built eons ago by the Father, first deity of the Makers, the Gate of Voom was used to access the hidden city of Amora deep in the heart of Hell. The Father used the gate to travel into Hell and oversee Amora, keeping personal watch over the Dark City. The portal has been inactive since the Dark Lord was cast down by the Father himself. Now dormant, it requires a tremendous energy source to reactivate. When the Father willingly gave up his throne in Urdak, and with the aid of his loyal servant Semir Maker, he was deconstructed into the AI known as Vega. In this form, he obscured himself from the vision of the Dark Lord, and maintained close watch over his creations on Earth. The Gate of Voom remains unused, and hidden from all who would seek to access the Dark Lord's realm. The reason why this gate confuses me is that it's a portal explicitly stated to be the only gate of its kind that can lead to the capital of Hell. Rephrasing that again, a portal that leads directly to the innermost, oldest parts of Hell is found on Earth, and seemingly kept by the UAC. To understand the implications of that, we head to the events of Doom 2016. During an encounter with Samuel Hayden, he had this to say.
We call it the Helix Stone. It is our most closely guarded asset. Olivia was obsessed with it.
In other words, according to him, the UAC's most guarded asset is the Helix Stone. And in context to 2016's plot, this makes sense. But one wonders why the Gate of Voom was considered secondary. a doorway that not only led to the devil's own home, but also a treasure trove of demonic technology. Of course, the Codex entry states that Vega kept the gate hidden, but within the DLC, it is in the middle of a city, and if UAC/ARC involvement says anything, it looks like plenty of people used to work here and knew this gate existed. Adding to this notion, Tyler McVicker conducted an interview with Hugo Martin and revealed some curious information afterwards.
I will say that the cut content of Doom Eternal is interesting because it seems as if the original plans for what became DLC 2 were not realized in any way, and they just ended up using a whole bunch of scraps left over from cut features and concepts from previous iterations of DLC 1 and Doom Eternal proper. Someone had informed me that according to some of the scripts of Reclaimed Earth, the second level of DLC 2, it was supposed to be, it's listed as a level in DLC 1, and the Gate of Voom was supposed to be leading you back into Urdak in the Holt and not towards, Emora. Which, if you pay attention to the Doom Eternal lore, the new Doom lore, that does actually seem to make a bit more sense than there being a secret portal to literal Hell capital city on Earth. So, I don't know.
So, was this a result of some difficult development decisions from the fallout of working at home? Who can say? Whatever the case, the lore surrounding the Gate of Voom seems a bit tacked on. And according to Hugo Martin on McVicker's stream, he admitted himself that its lore may not hold up to scrutiny.
How did the Sentinels get to Emora if the only way to get there was through the place in Reclaimed Earth, that gate?
I always thought that there was a portion of them still in Hell, but the specifics of that, I would say, loose. That's a plot hole that maybe that's an answer that might not stand up to scrutiny. But in the fiction, it's so there's a final betrayal by the priest where they all think they're going in there to do this final raid, and then the priest says sorry, and he closes the portals and leaves them there, and they're all left to die. And the final entry is this image of them all fighting, and I always imagined this was the last Getty's, the last stand of General Lee or whatever. And to me, they didn't all die. And that's kind of what I was thinking, but don't feel free to call bullshit on that.
That's fine.
But within the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't say the gate is my biggest critique on Tag 2's lore. For that, we would have to discuss the Dark Lord. If any of my past videos alluded to anything, I love the idea of this ancient ruler of Hell, him being hinted all the way back in Doom 2016 via Codex entries and hidden voices. Plus, in the art book, it is stated that he commands 6 archdemons that govern Hell in his stead. But before we begin talking about him, let's start with something mysterious. The ending of the Con Maker's boss fight. Following her death, a voice is heard.
We must leave now.
Originally, upon release of the game, the voice was simply titled as Mysterious Voice. However, it was later updated to be the Dark Lord's voice for a considerable period of time, only for it to be updated once again following Tag 2's release back to Mysterious Voice. Now, why the change? Well, that is an interesting question. According to Hugo Martin, this was a technical error.
Legit, no, I have no reason to lie about this. I've never lied to you before, I wouldn't start now. The mysterious voice was a mysterious voice. If I wanted it to be the Dark Lord, it would have been the Dark Lord at launch.
Oh
what
my God,
happened
that
was
clears
during
up
a patch.
so much.
During the patch, we accidentally swapped that. So what happens is that voice is connected in a string to something else. And when we changed that string, unbeknownst to us, I had no idea, it changed that. And we were like, I actually read it on the Reddit forum where everybody was like, hey guys, it's now this thing. And I was just like, oh, that's not good. And had we written out the story yet of Tag 2 and we changed it when we could, but there was definitely that little ripple effect of a bug of a string that we changed over here affecting that over there because we didn't make a new string for it. Just a simple, honest mistake.
I will take Hugo's word for it. That being said, the situation seems a bit odd. For example, the Dark Lord subtitle was left in the game for several months, staying even when the Ancient Gods Part 1 was released. On top of that, the biggest update for Doom Eternal that wasn't tagged to is the Super Gorness Master Level update, in which even across all that time in that massive update, the Dark Lord line was still kept in, only changing when Tag 2 was dropped. The situation becomes even more confusing when factoring in conflicting information. During Bite Me's interview on the subject, Hugo Martin would further elaborate that the voice belonged to something beyond, and he, quote, has no idea who the voice is.
What that is supposed to be, and again, I'll be completely honest, I don't know who that is. That's something beyond. That's it. You know, like, I wanted the idea that, like, there was something else, you know, something else in the world beyond. Really, that's it.
However, on Midnight's video on the subject, Hugo allegedly states that he in fact does know who the voice belongs to.
But this is what he said. No sequel setup, but didn't you hear that big voice in the sky scream, "No!" I mean, who the hell was that? I know who it is. Ha! Oh, Hugo. Oh, Hugo.
I am so confused.
So in short, I'm just really confused over here. Like what Hugo already stated, they likely had no idea who the voice was and left it open for a possible sequel. But for whatever reason, the line wasn't changed for months. All the while, miscommunication arose. For me personally, when I first completed Tag 2, I had no idea the Dark Lord line was changed back to a mysterious voice, which really confused me at first, since according to the lore, it was revealed that the Dark Lord is actually the first being who was betrayed by his creations, which include the Makers. It was also revealed that he was behind pretty much everything found in both 2016's and Eternal's lore, to manipulating both the Khan Maker and the Seraphim, along with placing the Doomslayer within the Divinity Machine in the first place. This was done in order to exact revenge against the Makers. In short, it was explicitly stated that the Dark Lord wanted the Slayer to take out the Makers. This is important, we'll come back to this later. So, under this context of the Dark Lord wishing for the death of the Makers, him yelling out no doesn't make much sense, since if the Dark Lord wanted the Slayer to take out the Makers, then why would he cry out in a grief-stricken rage upon the Khan Maker's death? However, to be fair, it wasn't the Dark Lord. Instead, a bit of a confusing situation arose with the voice. But I've deviated long enough. Let's discuss Doom's big bad, the Dark Lord. As stated before, I really like the idea of the Dark Lord as a character. Arguably, we have been waiting to see the leader of Hell since the original Doom games. If I could summarize my biggest critique on his presentation within Tag 2, it would be that I wish we got to spend more time with him. To further elaborate on that, let's discuss the last level Imora, in which you receive several codex entries that dumps a lot of information on you. Within the span of one level, it is revealed that the Dark Lord is actually responsible for the whole narrative since 2016, which in all fairness, I like that idea and would not mind it if it was built up and alluded to more. For example, if it was hinted that the Seraphim was manipulated by some unknown force before Tag 2 dropped. But another big question arises, the relationship between the Makers and Hell. According to Doom Eternal's base campaign, it was the Slayer that first exposed the Makers and the Sentinels to Hell.
Was it not the Slayer who brought the demons to us? The Khan Maker has you to thank for the gift of Argent energy. It is you who are responsible for your people's suffering.
Dress his wounds and bring him to us. I want to know more about the others he speaks of.
Yes, Your Grace.
As a result, the Slayer seldom speaks anymore, since the last time he spoke, he exposed the Makers to the demons, which led to even more destruction. But this whole plot point becomes confusing when Tag 2 dropped. That revealed Devoth, the Dark Lord, was actually the one who created the Makers. So in actuality, the Makers were already exposed to Hell. hence their creation from the literal devil, which makes me question the point of these pieces of lore in the base campaign. I realize Hugo is on live streams alleviating these lore discrepancies and providing much needed clarification on these points. I have nothing but high praise for the development team to be so forward and authentic when it comes to its community. But in all respects, I don't think it's a good sign that in order for the lore to be explained more clearly that you had to explain in a live stream rather than the game itself. With that said, a comic book or some lore compendium is said to be in the works that will help alleviate these lore discrepancies, which I am very much excited for. But this goes back to my main critique on the codex entries on Amora, in which it seems like the last level is rushing to give out these codex entries since the Dark Lord boss fight is rapidly approaching. As a result, its information feels a bit last minute, like a student rushing to give out as much information as he can in the last paragraph of an essay. Also, what happened to the 6 archdemons? The Doom Eternal art book states, "For all of eternity, hell has been ruled by an ancient order of evil. 6 sovereign chapters of the 6 eldest demon gods, descendants of the 6 unholy bloodlines born from the primordial black heart. The immortal archdemons claiming dominion over the innermost circles of hell, rule as lieutenants of the Dark Lord." Now, what were the archdemons doing when their capital was being invaded by a Sentinel army? Were they on coffee break or something? You could make the argument that the Dark Lord was supposed to have a one-on-one fight with the Slayer, but if that's the case, then why break out the Titans and an entire demon army on him? Are there even any plans on introducing the 6 archdemons? There is a lot of interesting information on them in the art book, and I was kind of hoping we would see more of them in other regions in Hell. To add on to this, it was stated that the demonic voice found in Doom 2016 is the Dark Lord, which makes sense. But after playing through the game, I am confused on some points. As stated before, the Dark Lord placed Doomguy into the divinity machine for him to eventually take out the Makers. In short, the codex entries state that this was a part of the Dark Lord's master plan to exact revenge through the Slayer's rampage. But within context to Doom 2016, the Dark Lord isn't necessarily rooting for the Slayer.
You should not have allowed his location to be discovered. You have failed us.
It was not me. It was Samuel. He led them to his tomb. Please, we can overcome this. I promise. The gate will be opened as planned.
Hugo Martin already took note of this question and addressed it in live streams. It's just that this follows through my previous criticism in how the lore introduced in Tag 2 seems to jump out, only to be addressed in a live stream. In all fairness, this also assumes that id Software had this massive plan from the get-go, whereas more likely they developed Doom 2016 as a singular title, and not this massive Doom universe. That being said, there are some points in the lore that I find very interesting. For example, the Seraphs have a really curious backstory, in which the Codex states, "The very first creations molded from the void in Urdak. Seraphs are bound to the Father's will. The angelic creatures helped build the Father's works, assisted his research, and once winged through creation to do the Father's bidding. After the Battle of Isancast, the Father stripped them of their wings." What exactly happened at the Battle of Isancast? Did the Seraphs rebel against the Father, causing him to strip them of their wings? Well, I'm not really sure, but a possible hint comes from Hugo Martin that states when Makers go through the transfiguration process, they turn into Lovecraftian entities.
For now, Samuel is somewhere. He's not dead, but he's somewhere. He's going through the transfiguration, slowly turning into a giant Cthulhu beast, because that's what happens to Makers if they don't get the Argent Juice. So now that the Father is no more and Urdak is in ruins, all of the Makers will eventually go through the transfiguration process. And for them, they don't die. They turn into Cthulhu monsters.
Another mystery are the origins of the demonic crucible. For the longest time, many theorize it belonged to the Dark Lord, which I am not sure is the case, since an entity we see that wields the artifact is this demonic figure. We currently have no idea who it is. Plus, in Tag 1's Codex entry, the Dark Lord is depicted wielding the Slayer Crucible and Knight Sentinel armor, which is interesting. What can explain this? Was the Dark Lord somehow affiliated with the Sentinels? Well, it might be connected with the origins of the World Spear, where its guardians wear similar armor, and it was stated that the Crucibles are connected with the Wraiths. So in short, in the future we may learn more about the World Spear and where it came from. But there is one more mystery that looms in the distance: the tree prophecy of Doom 2016. Who is this Dark Priest? Is it Samuel Hayden, or is it some other character? Who knows? We may learn more in the future, since live streams intentionally avoid answering any question relating to this prophecy. Is this a sign? Well, maybe. Despite all the mystery, the Slayer now rests in his sarcophagus, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of how this final chapter was handled, I do want to give id Software proper credit, that they managed to create 2 expansions in spite of both working at home, and seemingly on a time limit with the 1-year pass. With those 2 constraints in mind, I think that's incredible. From what I can tell, director Hugo Martin seems like a genuinely nice dude, the kind you would like to have a beer with. My critiques here are just stating my piece purely as a fan. And again, if you enjoyed Tag 2, then all the power to you. If I could summarize all my critiques into one phrase, it would be, please take your time with the next Doom. A lot of story and lore discrepancies could have been solved with both build-up and subtlety. But again, that's just my view on it. In all honesty, I could care less about the story if the game plays well, which I honestly still have a lot of fun with. Can't wait for the master levels to come out whenever it does. And I am also excited for a potential Doom comic or lore compendium whenever that may come out. It could alleviate a lot of my critiques that I made here. Also, not really sure how to segue into this, but the Dark Lord's throne is shaped like Eternal's logo, which I thought was pretty cool. Before I sign out here, I do want to give a special shout out to both Jupiter and Venomous Frenchie. Jupiter for providing the intro music, and Venomous Frenchie for helping out with research on this vid. Both create insanely great content within their respective fields, and we'll give a link to their channels within the description. If you want to see Night Owl continue on, donating as little as $1 over in Patreon will honestly go a long way. If not, liking and commenting also helps a great deal. But it is about that time again. Regardless of what happens, have a wonderful rest of the day or night. Please be civil. Also, I recognize that I may have gotten some things wrong in this video. Feel free to put me on blast for that. I will accept my penance. That being said, next time we'll be discussing something a bit more penitent. Have a damn good one.